should now be standing on the south side of Piccadilly, outside the entrance to Green Park Tube Station and next to the famous Ritz Hotel. Now, stand with the road to your left and start walking along Piccadilly in front of the Ritz Hotel until you reach the junction with St James's Street, which is the second street you'll come to. Now, we can't walk past the Ritz without talking a little bit about it, can we? Stop for a moment in front of it. The hotel was opened in 1906 by the famous hotelier César Ritz, and right from the start it was considered one of the greatest hotels in the world. These days it's still one of the finest hotels in London, and it's the go-to place for anyone looking to spoil themselves with a traditional afternoon tea in its opulent glass-ceilinged palm court. Let's continue walking along Piccadilly while I tell you more. Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond books, dined here often with his wife, but the Ritz didn't actually feature in any of the Bond films. It's unthinkable, though, that someone as sophisticated as James Bond didn't spend time here over the years. In fact, in the original novels, Bond stayed here twice, once in Diamonds Are Forever and again in The Man with the Golden Gun. And to add to the Bond connections, Roger Moore stayed at the Ritz in 2003 after he received his knighthood from the Queen at Buckingham Palace. Now turn right and walk down St James's Street. You're entering one of London's most prestigious areas, named after St James's Palace, which is the red brick building that you'll see at the end of the street. This was built in 1536 on the orders of King Henry VIII, and the area was subsequently developed into a fashionable place for aristocrats to live and to be near to the royal court. St James's is also home to some of the oldest established luxury shops in the world, and many of these have provided the various actors who've played James Bond with shoes, clothes, and more over the years. On the left as we walk, you'll see Jermyn Street, which is home to many of these exclusive stores. Down there you'll find Turnbull and Asser, who supplied the shirt and bow tie combination for Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. Further along the street there's Sunspell, who tailored their Riviera polo shirt for Daniel Craig in the same film. There's also Floris, a perfumer that's been in the same shop since 1730, and in Ian Fleming's books, Bond always wore Floris No. 89 fragrance. Keep going, and be careful as you cross the little side streets along the way. Stop now for a moment and look to your left across the road at the building with the white ground floor and the columned entrance porch. This is Boodle's, an exclusive private members club that was founded in the year 1762 and was named after its head waiter, Edward Boodle. Ian Fleming was a member of Boodle's, and this is where he usually had lunch, mainly on his own, and sitting at a table looking out onto the street. On one occasion he met the actor David Niven here, and the two discussed the possibility of Niven playing the part of James Bond in the movies. The producers didn't think he was tough enough for the part, though. In the books, James Bond is a member of a club called Blades, and this was based largely on Fleming's experience of Boodle's, together with a few other London clubs. In Moonraker, Fleming described the atmosphere at Blades as somewhere there might be cheats and perverts among the members, but the elegance of the room invested each one with a kind of aristocracy. Now, there's no evidence that Boodle's actually had any cheats and perverts amongst its members, but as one of London's oldest and most exclusive clubs, it's certainly frequented by a good number of aristocrats. Start walking down the road again, and we'll hear a little about Ian Fleming as we go. Fleming was born into a wealthy family in 1908. He went to school at Eton, where he wasn't a particularly gifted scholar, but where he excelled in sport. He then went to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, but before he completed his training, he had to leave after contracting, let's call it a social disease. Keep going straight. At the next corner, turn right into St James's Place and keep walking. Ian Fleming chose the name James Bond for his hero because he wanted a name that sounded dull and boring. At Goldeneye, his home in Jamaica, he had a book called Birds of the West Indies, the author of which was called James Bond, and he thought that this was the ideal name. Now turn left into the alleyway and walk down to the hotel you see in front of you and stop there. This is Duke's, a small luxury hotel that opened in 1908, which coincidentally is the same year that Ian Fleming was born. Duke's Bar was one of Ian Fleming's favourite watering holes, and it's said that this was the place where he first introduced the phrase, shaken, not stirred, which of course has become synonymous with James Bond ever since. In the first book, Casino Royale, and in the film, Bond gives the bartender specific instructions as to how to make his favourite drink. The recipe consisted of 3 measures of gin, 1 measure of vodka, half a measure of Kina Lillet, and served with a slice of lemon and shaken. Duke's Bar has become a must-visit for many James Bond fans, and nowadays you can enjoy a modern-day version of Bond's tipple with their classic Vesper Martini. A white-jacketed bartender will mix it in front of you with all the style and flourish that you would expect. If you do order a second one, then take care because it's very strong. If you try to order a third though, you'll very politely be told no. As I mentioned earlier, Ian Fleming had a number of meetings with potential producers in attempts to sell the film rights for his books. It could well be that some of those meetings took place right here in Duke's Bar. Now, we've got a walk to do, so I don't recommend visiting the bar right now. Instead, let's get going again. Walk back out of the alleyway, turn right at the end, and walk along St. James's Place back to St. James's Street. With time on his option running out, Saltzman was introduced to another, more experienced producer called Albert R. Broccoli, better known as Cubby. He had always thought that there was great potential for the Bond books to be made into films. The two decided they would work together, so they formed a holding company to license the rights to produce the films and to protect copyrights and trademarks. Continue back to St. James's Street. Just ahead is a pedestrian crossing. Take this and cross to the other side of St. James's Street, and then turn right. Start walking down the road, and watch out for traffic coming from your left as you cross King Street. As you can see, this is a very elegant part of town, and in a few moments we'll arrive at a couple of exclusive shops that can count James Bond amongst their distinguished clients. Stop here for a moment and have a look at the first of these shops. This is John Lobb, a company that's been making handmade shoes and boots since the mid-1800s. Their handmade shoes take months to make and prices start at around £5,500. The good news is they also produce a number of ranges of ready-made shoes. In Casino Royale, Daniel Craig wore a pair of John Lobb Luffield shoes, and although these are no longer available, for anywhere between £1,000 and £2,000, you could certainly enjoy the James Bond lifestyle by choosing something similar from among the current ranges. Walk just a few steps further down the road now, and you'll come to Lock & Co., which opened in 1765 and is the oldest hat shop in the world. Now everyone can picture the scene where James Bond casually tosses his hat onto the hat stand when he enters Moneypenny's office. This was first seen in 1962 in Dr. No, with Sean Connery doing the tossing, and carried on with both George Lazenby and Roger Moore. In all, the hat toss appeared in 9 of the Bond films. The hat in question was the Sandown Trilby hat provided by Lock & Co., and this classic Trilby is still available today in their current range. Timothy Dalton was also dressed by Lock & Co. in Licence to Kill, when he wore their dove grey ascot top hat to Felix Leiter's wedding. And the villains got a look in too. The iconic bowler hat thrown by Oddjob in Goldfinger, which decapitated a statue at Auric Goldfinger's golf club, was also made by Lock & Co. This went on to be auctioned in 1998, just around the corner from here at Christie's, where it sold for a cool £62,000. We're going to make our way now to the first location that actually featured in the Bond films. Walk down to the end of the road and then turn left onto Pall Mall. As you walk, you'll pass Berry Brothers and Rudd, which is the oldest wine and spirit merchant in Great Britain. To my knowledge, it's never appeared in the Bond books or films, but it does offer a 2011 Bollinger James Bond 007 edition champagne, with pricing starting at £430 for a case, plus duty and VAT. Now turn left and continue along Pall Mall. We've got a few minutes until we get to our next stop, so let's talk a little about the early days of the Bond movies, and how Sean Connery came to be chosen for this iconic role. The first movie to be made was Dr. No in 1962, although this was actually the 6th James Bond book that Fleming had written. The first book was Casino Royale, but because of issues over film rights and limited finances, another book needed to be chosen, and Dr. No was considered to be the most viable option. Now watch for traffic coming from your right, cross St James's Square and continue along Pall Mall. Once they had chosen the main actor, it was then time to decide upon a director, and that person was Terence Young. Stop now and look across the road at the building at the other side of the pedestrian crossing. This is the Reform Club, a prestigious private members' club that was formed in 1836. It moved into this building in 1841. The building was designed by Charles Barry, who was one of the most important architects of Victorian times. His most famous work is the Palace of Westminster, or the Houses of Parliament as most people know it. If you're a Downton Abbey fan, he also designed Highclere Castle, which is where that hugely popular series was filmed. The reason we're stopping here is because the Reform Club featured in 2 of the James Bond films, Die Another Day and Quantum of Solace. In Die Another Day, the Reform Club doubles as Blades, and this is where the famous sword fight took place between James Bond, played by Pierce Brosnan, and Gustav Graves, played by Toby Stephens. Just a few steps away from the entrance door is the atrium, where many of the lobby scenes took place. We first see Bond when he enters the atrium, and speaks to Verity, a fencing instructor, played by Madonna. She sang the theme song for the film, and part of the deal was that she would also have a cameo role. In true Madonna fashion, though, she insisted that her own writer create the dialogue for the scene. Start walking again and continue along Pall Mall. We'll pass the Travellers Club and the Athenaeum Club on the way, both of which are on the same side of the road as the Reform. 6 years after Die Another Day, Quantum of Solace was released. In this film, M was played by Judi Dench, who played this part in 7 of the Bond films. Now we're going to cross Waterloo Place. Continue along Pall Mall. Nowadays, any budding James Bond can simply look at the MI5 and MI6 websites to check out their vacancies. Going back to the mid-20th century, though, when Fleming was writing his books, the private clubs around here were a major recruiting ground for new agents. Now, we need to cross Haymarket. Like so many roads in London, Haymarket was named after the trade that used to take place there. Back in the 1500s, this was first recorded as a market for animal fodder and other farm produce. We're making our way now to Trafalgar Square. Along the way, you'll cross Suffolk Street and Whitcomb Street, so take care and watch for traffic as you go. Trafalgar Square is considered to be the centre of London. In fact, all distances to London are calculated to a plaque in the ground at the bottom of the square. The square is dedicated to Admiral Lord Nelson, and when you get there you'll see his statue on top of the tall column in the centre. You're now coming into Trafalgar Square. Keep walking straight along the top of the square and make your way to the grand columned entrance with the dome above that you see ahead of you. The building you're walking alongside is the National Gallery, which was founded in 1824 and moved into this purpose-built building in 1838. It was built here because, as I mentioned before, this was considered to be the centre of London. It was easy for the rich to arrive here in their carriages from West London, and for the poor to get here on foot from the East End. The idea was that the paintings could be enjoyed by all sectors of society, and not just the privileged few. Stop here now because we've come to the next of our James Bond locations. The National Gallery featured in Skyfall, and this is the place where Bond, played by Daniel Craig, first met his new quartermaster, or Q as we know him, played by Ben Whishaw. The scene is filmed inside the gallery, in room 34, known as the Sackler Room. We see Bond sitting on a bench looking at a painting of a ship. The painting is by J.M.W. Turner, and it's called the Fighting Temeraire. This was one of the most important ships at the Battle of Trafalgar. Turn now so that you have your back to the gallery and walk down the steps that you see in front of you. Turn right towards the big arch that you'll see ahead of you. This is Admiralty Arch, which forms the entrance to the Mall, which is the long road that leads down to Buckingham Palace. The arch was built on the orders of King Edward VII as a memorial to his mother, Queen Victoria. Start walking and head back the way you came to the end of the road and then turn right. Once you've done that, then follow the pavement around to the right, to where it meets Whitehall. When the filming was taking place, large portions of Trafalgar Square were closed off, together with a number of surrounding roads. After dark, huge jets of water were sprayed onto the roads to give the scene its wet look, and only something as high profile as a James Bond film could get permission to close down such a major intersection as this. The street we're walking along now is called Whitehall. It's named after the Palace of Whitehall, which used to dominate this area. At the time, it was the largest palace in Europe, and in the year 1530, King Henry VIII moved the royal residence here, and it remained the main royal palace until it burned down in 1698. Now, stop here and look across the road at the building with number 55 either side of the entrance door. This is one of those government buildings I mentioned, and it's currently the offices of the Department for International Trade. The building was seen in Spectre, and the numbers either side of the door were clearly visible in that movie. Before that, though, in Skyfall it had a more prominent part. This was the building where Bond stands on the roof looking over London in the final scene. Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament could be seen in the distance. As Bond was standing there, he was joined by Moneypenny, who at this time was a field agent. Ian Fleming never gave her a first name in his books, but in Skyfall she was called Eve. Moneypenny handed Bond a wooden box and told him that M's will had been read that morning. When Bond was looking out over Whitehall, you could clearly see a building with a dome at each corner, and this is where we're heading now. Start walking again and head further along Whitehall. Stop here now and look across the road at the building with the dome at each corner. This is the old War Office building. It's currently being renovated at the time of this recording, so you might not be seeing it at its best. It's actually being turned into a 5-star hotel and 85 luxury apartments, and is planned to open in 2022. The building was completed in 1906 and is Grade 2 listed, which means there are strict restrictions as to what alterations can be made to its exterior. Some of the better-known names that have had their offices here have been Winston Churchill. But why are we stopping here now? Well, the old War Office building has featured in 3 James Bond films as the headquarters of MI6. We first see it in Octopussy, with the building on the right-hand side as you look up to Trafalgar Square. The next time was in A View to a Kill, with Roger Moore's James Bond reporting to the office immediately after the opening credits. As Duran Duran's theme song ends, we see a mounted soldier from the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment walking into the road. Let's start walking again and keep going down Whitehall. When you get to the pedestrian crossing, you'll be right next to Horse Guards where the Household Cavalry keep guard. Now turn left into Horse Guards Avenue and keep walking. Again, you'll find that this area is pretty well dominated by government buildings. Now stop here and look across the road to your right, at the building with steps going up to a large columned entrance, with statues either side. This is the home of the Ministry of Defence, which was created when the Admiralty, the War Office and the Air Ministry merged in 1964. This building featured in For Your Eyes Only as the Ministry of Defence. The exterior was used for an establishing shot, before we see the first Sea Lord informing the Defence Minister about the loss of a British spy ship in the Ionian Sea. It also appears briefly in the latest film, No Time to Die, when Bond parks his Aston Martin in the road opposite and starts walking towards the building. In both films you can clearly see the 2 statues either side of the entrance. These are called Air and Fire, and were the work of Charles Wheeler, who was a prominent architect who specialised in working with bronze and stone. Now, time to move on. Stand with your back to the Ministry of Defence and start walking up the road ahead of you, which is called Whitehall Court. On the right-hand side is where Daniel Craig parks his Aston Martin V8 in No Time to Die, and then walks off towards the MOD building that we've just seen. Whitehall Court is the building that runs along the length of the road. It looks like it's all one building, but it was actually built in 2 stages with 2 different architects, and construction was completed in 1887. Okay, stop here now and have a look at number 2 Whitehall Court just across the road. This is a restaurant that's part of the Royal Horse Guards Hotel. You'll notice that there's a blue plaque on the wall to the right of the door. These plaques are put in place by English Heritage, and they usually commemorate someone of historical importance who lived in the building at some point. As you can see, this plaque commemorates Sir Mansfield Cumming. He was the first head of the Secret Intelligence Service and was the inspiration for James Bond's M. In 1911, the Secret Intelligence Service moved into this building and stayed here until 1919, although Smith Cumming, which was his full name, continued to use this as his office and private residence until he died in 1923. To say he was an unusual character is a bit of an understatement. He wore a monocle and carried a sword stick. He used to drive around London at great speed in his Rolls-Royce, which had special number plates that left him immune to prosecution. Now, start walking again and carry on to the end of the road. Interestingly, the top 3 floors of Cummings' old headquarters have been transformed into a luxury penthouse apartment, which was put on the market for £5.5 million in August 2020. I would think this must make it the ultimate home for some wealthy 007 enthusiast. Now turn right to safely cross Whitehall Place, then keep going. We're off now to see a couple of locations that featured in Skyfall. In that film, the main villain is Raul Silva, who's played by Javier Bardem. Silva was once an MI6 agent, but he'd been involved in some unauthorized hacking of the Chinese. Stop here now and you'll see a small gate with some stairs going downwards behind it. In the film, there was a fake underground sign attached to the frame above the gate. This is where Raul Silva emerges from the underground, having managed to get away from Bond. By now, he'd changed into the uniform of a police officer, and when he gets into the street, he's whisked away in a police car. He's on a mission to assassinate M, played by Judi Dench, who's attending a government inquiry. In the scene, as Silva gets into the police car, you can see some more fake underground signs in the background, so we'll go and have a look at where these were placed now. Start walking again to the corner where it meets Northumberland Avenue, and then carefully cross to the other side of the road. Let's stop here briefly now, next to the green cabin that you can see. As you look up Northumberland Avenue, you can see the Playhouse Theatre in front of you. To its right is an exit from Charing Cross Station, which is only used at certain times of the day. In Skyfall, this becomes the entrance to Embankment Station. The Charing Cross sign is covered up by a much larger sign showing Embankment Station, and fake underground signs are placed above it. The real entrance to Embankment Station is a little further on in the direction that we're going to head in a moment. Before we move on though, have a closer look at the green cabin. This has nothing to do with James Bond, but it's a shame to move on without talking a little bit about it. This is a shelter where London's taxi drivers can take a rest and enjoy a cup of tea or a meal. It's one of just 13 of these shelters still remaining. Now let's move on through the tunnel into Embankment Place. Keep walking on the right-hand side alongside the shops. You'll then come to the real entrance of Embankment Station. Once past this, you'll see an opening into some gardens directly in front of you. Now walk through the entrance into Victoria Embankment Gardens. Continue straight along the path. We've got a few minutes before we reach our next location, so let's think for a while about the various actors who've played James Bond, and enjoy the picturesque gardens as you go. Sean Connery played Bond in the first 5 movies, but after You Only Live Twice, he decided he'd had enough. He felt that he was Bond, and he wasn't earning what he deserved, so he decided that this was his last Bond movie. It's reported that even Her Majesty the Queen asked him if this really was his last Bond film, to which he replied, "I'm afraid so, ma'am." As you're walking, look to your left, and you'll see the back of the famous Savoy Hotel. This was the first purpose-built deluxe hotel in London, setting new standards of luxury and service. Ian Fleming was a regular visitor to both the Savoy Grill and also the American Bar. In fact, he invited Sean Connery for lunch here during pre-production of Dr. No. Turn left now and walk along Victoria Embankment. Carefully cross Savoy Place and Savoy Street, and continue walking under Waterloo Bridge. Now, on the left you should see some steps. Walk up these, and when you're at the top, turn right and walk to the entrance to Somerset House. Stop once you're at the top of the stairs, at the entrance to Somerset House. This is a location that's been used in both GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. Now, at certain times of the year, Somerset House is closed to the public as it's used for functions, such as London Fashion Week amongst others. Start walking through the entrance and continue along the river terrace. As you walk along the river terrace, take some time to admire the magnificent neoclassical facade of this imposing building. This was built when the previous Somerset House was demolished here in 1775. The original building was built in the mid-1500s, and some of its residents have included Queen Elizabeth I, Henrietta Maria, who was the wife of King Charles I, and Catherine of Braganza, the wife of Charles II. Take some time as well to admire the fantastic views over the River Thames. Back in the days before the embankment was built, the river came right up to the foot of the terrace, and boats would tie up below so people could arrive via the river. Continue along the terrace. Now walk through the doors that you see and enter the building. You'll then see a second set of doors in front of you, so take these and you'll end up in the grand courtyard which was used in the 2 Bond films. Stop here for a moment and have a look round at the fabulous architecture that surrounds this square. This courtyard has been seen in loads of movies, including, as I mentioned earlier, GoldenEye and then in Tomorrow Never Dies. In GoldenEye, this becomes St. Petersburg when James Bond, played for the first time by Pierce Brosnan, flies to Russia. He's met at the airport by his CIA contact Jack Wade, who's played by Joe Don Baker. The airport, by the way, is not in Russia at all, but it's actually the Queen's Stand at Epsom Racecourse in Surrey. Wade then drives Bond into St. Petersburg in his battered old blue car, where it promptly breaks down. We then see Wade fiddling around with the engine and asking Bond to pass him some tools, and finally asking for a sledgehammer. Once you're through the arch, turn left and head along Strand. We're on our way now to our final stop on this tour. Stop at the corner. Now keep walking along Wellington Street, keeping to the left-hand side of the street. You'll see a white building with a grand columned entrance in front of you, and that's the Lyceum Theatre. Once you've passed the Lyceum, keep walking straight on up the road. We're about to enter Covent Garden, which is a really vibrant part of London and famous for being Theatreland. Most of the major theatres in London are situated in and around this area. We're going to turn off this street in a short while to head to our last destination. It's worth mentioning, though, that if you were to carry on up this road, you'd get to the London Film Museum. For several years, this has been home to the Bond in Motion exhibition, which is the largest official collection of James Bond vehicles in the world. We finish our tour just minutes from here, so if it's open and you have time, then this exhibition is well worth a visit. Now turn left into Tavistock Street and carry on down to the end of the road. This is called Maiden Lane. I mentioned earlier that this area is known as Theatreland. Now, as well as being full of theatres, it's also full of restaurants. Our last Bond location is one of these restaurants. In fact, it's the oldest restaurant in London. Stop here now and have a look at the elegant restaurant on your right. This is Rules, and as I mentioned earlier, this is the oldest restaurant in London. Rules was established here in the year 1798 by Thomas Rule, and since then it's been owned by just 3 families. It specialises in traditional English cuisine, and particularly in game. Now we're here because Rules had a brief role in the 2015 film Spectre. This was the restaurant where M, played by Ralph Fiennes, is sitting at his favourite table having dinner, when he's joined by Ben Whishaw as Q, and Naomi Harris as Moneypenny. After a short conversation about Bond's behaviour, M declares he's on his own, and then gets up and leaves the table and heads out into the rain. The scene here took 3 days to shoot, but in actual fact only lasts a very short time in the movie. To explain why the restaurant was closed, Rules published on its website that it would be closed due to essential work being carried out in the kitchen. If you fancy eating here yourself, then when you book you can ask to sit at M's table in Spectre, and the staff will know exactly which table you're talking about.